My name is Margaret Hale. Everybody calls me Meg, and I'm 70 years old. But this story starts the autumn I buried my husband and watched my own children carve up a 40-year shipyard between them like wolves over a carcass. They got the boatyard, the waterfront house, the whole Hale name stamped on the side of a building, and me? After 46 years of marriage, Walter left me exactly one thing in his will: a toy boat, a little wooden model no bigger than a loaf of bread. My kids laughed out loud in the lawyer's office. I didn't. Because that very night, alone in the dark with that little boat in my lap, I ran my thumb down the hull and it clicked open. And what my husband had hidden inside it changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my children, and the woman I used to be. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end. I was 69 years old the morning they called me from the yard, and I have not been the same woman since. It was the second Tuesday of October, the kind of cold gray Maine morning where the fog sits on the harbor like a wet wool blanket and doesn't lift till noon. I was standing at the kitchen counter in our house on Sefton Point, peeling apples for a pie nobody would eat, when the phone rang. It was the kid Danny, one of Walter's apprentices, barely 20. He couldn't get the words out. He just kept saying, "Mrs. Hale, you gotta come down to the yard right now." Walter had been laid out across the half-finished hull of a 32-foot sloop he was building for a doctor down in Portland, chisel still in his hand. His heart had quit on him sometime between when Danny went out for coffee and when he came back. The doctor said it was fast. Massive. They said he probably didn't feel much. I think about that a lot. Probably didn't feel much. My husband died alone, leaning on a boat with sawdust in his beard, and I wasn't there to hold his hand. We were married 46 years, and I wasn't in the room. That's the thing that wakes me up at 2 in the morning even now. The funeral was 3 days later. It rained, of course. It always rains in Sefton in October. I want you to understand something about my children before I tell you what they did, because it matters later. Russell, my oldest, was 44. Big guy, firm handshake, the kind of man who looks you in the eye while he's lying to you. He'd been running the business side of the yard for years and he loved it. Not the boats, mind you, the deals. Diane was 41, my middle one, my only girl. She married into money, a real estate fella named Foster, and somewhere along the way, she decided the most important thing a person was impressive. And then there was Teddy, Theodore, my baby 36, the one who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms. Teddy never had a spine of his own. Whatever Russell decided, Teddy nodded along. I used to tell myself that was just being agreeable. I know better now. At the funeral home, Russell stood by the casket with his phone pressed to his ear, setting up a meeting with the lawyer, didn't even wait for them to close the lid. Diane sat in the front row, scrolling through her tablet, comparing quotes for some kitchen renovation, her eyes dry as bone. And Teddy at least had the decency to look sad, but he kept glancing at Russell to see how sad he was allowed to look. I sat alone in the second row. 46 years a wife, mother of 3, and not one of them sat next to me. There was one thing at that funeral nobody understood except me. Walter had asked in writing that they carve 3 words into the lid of his casket. The undertaker thought it was strange, but he did it. 3 words right above where his hands were folded, true to the keel. It was Walter's saying. He carved it into every single boat he ever built, somewhere down low near the waterline where most folks never looked. The keel's the backbone of a boat, the spine that everything else gets built onto. True to the keel meant true to the thing underneath, the thing that holds you up. He used to say it like a wedding vow. Russell looked at those 3 words and muttered, "Dad and his boat poetry." Diane didn't look at all. I looked. I just didn't know yet that he'd carved it for me. The will got read 2 days after we put him in the ground. Gerald Prescott had been the yard's corporate lawyer for 15 years, a tall, dry man with a voice like a tax form. His office was up on the 4th floor of the only building in Sefton you could call a tower, all glass and chrome, looking out over the working harbor. He had us sit at a conference table so polished I could see my own face in it, and let me tell you, I looked old, tired, small. Russell took the chair at the head of the table like he already owned the place. Diane sat to his right, phone face up. Teddy to his left, drumming his fingers. And me? They left me the chair at the far end, down by the door, like I was somebody who'd wandered into the wrong meeting. Prescott cleared his throat and started reading in that flat voice lawyers use to take the humanity out of the worst moments of your life. To Russell, 40% of the shares of Hale and Reed Boatworks plus the management contracts. Russell smiled. I knew that smile. He used to smile like that as a boy when he found quarters in the couch cushions. Except this wasn't quarters, this was the whole couch. To Diane, 30% of the shares, plus the house on Sefton Point, my house, the house I raised them in, and everything in it. Diane just nodded, like a bank teller confirming a deposit. To Teddy, 20%, plus Walter's collection of antique sailboats and the small finishing shed down at the south end of the harbor. Teddy exhaled, relieved. My baby was relieved. 90% of a 40-year empire divided up clean. And then Prescott watched him do it. I watched him avoid my eyes. And to my wife, Margaret, he read, I leave the wooden model boat, known as the Margaret B, currently kept on the mantle of our home with the absolute condition that it not be taken apart, opened forced, or tampered with by anyone under any circumstance. Silence. Then Russell laughed, a short, ugly bark of a laugh that bounced off the glass. Diane put her hand over her mouth, but her shoulders were going. Even Teddy, let out this little nervous chuckle. A boat, Russell said, wiping his eyes. He worked himself into a heart attack and left Mom a toy. That's got to be a typo, Jerry. Come on. There's no error, Prescott said. Mr. Hale revised the will 3 weeks before his passing. It was witnessed by 3 independent parties. It's airtight. Diane finally looked at me, not with worry, with math. Mom gets a toy boat and we split the yard? She shrugged one shoulder. Okay, well, there's a clause about the house, right? How long does she have? That's the part that broke something in me. Not the boat. The way my daughter skipped right past the toy boat and went straight to how fast can we get her out of the house. Prescott shuffled his papers. Mrs. Hale may remain in the residence for 30 days. After that, she is to vacate. 30 days, Diane was already nodding. That's plenty. We can probably speed that up, honestly. Mom doesn't need all that space rattling around. We'll find her something, a 1-bedroom somewhere reasonable. Reasonable, that word. I almost laughed. That's everything? I said. My voice came out strange, far away, like it belonged to somebody else. 46 years, and I get a toy. Russell snapped his briefcase shut. Don't make it a whole thing, Mom. Dad made his call. He obviously had his reasons. Maybe ask yourself what you did to end up with a model boat. He stood. We've got a yard to run. And just like that, they got up and walked out, already arguing about percentages and expansion plans and who'd take Dad's office. Not one of them looked back. I sat at the end of that long, shiny table, holding my own reflection, wondering how a whole life could shrink down to something you could fit in 2 hands. I went and got the boat that same afternoon, before Diane could supervise me out of my own living room. The Margaret B sat on the mantel where it had sat for 30 years. It was the first boat Walter and I ever built together, back when we were broke and in love and living over a bait shop. A little wooden sloop, about 16 inches, hull painted that deep harbor green he loved, with my name lettered on the transom in gold leaf, so fine you needed good light to read it. He'd named it after me before he'd named anything else after anybody. I held it in my lap that night in a house that was technically my daughter's now, and I cried for the first time since he died. Not at the funeral, not at the will, but there alone with a toy boat. I cried for the 46 years. I cried for the girl I used to be, and I'm going to tell you about her, because she matters. Before I was Walter's wife, before I was anybody's mother, I was Margaret Bellamy, and I was a naval draftsman, a good one. The best in my class at the Maritime College up in Castine. I could draw the lines of a hull freehand and have them come out fair. I had a job offer from a yacht designer in Newport the same spring Walter asked me to marry him. I picked Walter. I picked the babies. I folded up those drawings and put them in a drawer, and I became Mrs. Hale, and I told myself for 46 years that I'd given up my career for my family. I want you to hold on to that. I gave up my career. I believe that with my whole heart. Remember it. So I'm sitting there crying, turning the little boat over in my hands, and my thumb runs along the keel, the backbone, down at the bottom, and I feel something I shouldn't feel. A seam, a line in the wood that's just slightly too straight to be a grain line. And 46 years fall away, and I'm Margaret Bellamy again, and my hands know exactly what they're looking at. Because I drew this hull, not this exact boat, but this hull shape, this section, I'd know it anywhere. And whoever built a boat from those lines knew that right here, where the deadwood meets the keel, you could hide a void. I pressed it, both thumbs, the way you'd spring a hidden drawer. Click, a panel in the keel slid back, no bigger than a deck of cards, and inside, not money. I want you to understand there was no money. There was a small brass key, an old one, a folded square of paper that turned out to be a hand-drawn chart of the coast, with a single set of coordinates circled in red, and a note in Walter's blocky shipwright's handwriting. You drew this hull before any of them were born. Follow it. W. I sat on the floor of that house for a long, long time. Outside, the foghorn moaned out on the point. And for the first time in 9 days, I wasn't crying because I was broken. I was crying because I was furious. And because, somewhere way down deep, something that had been asleep for 46 years had just opened one eye. The next 3 weeks, my children dismantled my life with the efficiency of a salvage crew. Russell sent an appraiser to put a number on every stick of furniture. Diane hired a moving company and then personally stood in the doorway with a clipboard while 2 men in gray coveralls packed my things, and she checked every box, every single box, like I was going to smuggle out the good silver. It's just protocol, Mom, she said, not even looking up. Don't make it weird. Don't make it weird. As if there's a way to not make it weird when your daughter's frisking your luggage in the house you brought her home to from the hospital. Teddy didn't come at all. He texted, Mom, I'm slammed this week. Russ is handling logistics. Talk soon. That word again, logistics. My family had a whole vocabulary for getting rid of me. The apartment they found me was exactly what you'd picture. One room above a laundromat on the wrong end of Water Street, beige walls, a window looking straight into a brick air shaft, a 2-burner hot plate, and a fridge that hummed like it was thinking about giving up. 8 boxes. 46 years fit into 8 cardboard boxes and the back of a van, but I had the chart and I had the key, and I didn't tell a soul. Here's where most people break. I almost did. The money Russell promised, we'll float you the first 6 months, Mom, came exactly once. $600 with a post-it stuck to the statement in Diane's handwriting. Reduce this. We feel like you overspend. $600 for rent and food and the blood pressure medication that ran me $80 a month. So I did the math the way poor people do math. I started cutting my pills in half, then taking them every other day. I ate 1 real meal a day-old bread from the discount rack at the grocery store, a hunk of cheese when it was marked down. I lost weight I didn't have to lose. When I caught myself in the bathroom mirror, I saw a stranger, a thin gray ghost wearing my mother's face. But, and this is the part that kept me alive, I had somewhere to be. Every morning I got up off that lumpy mattress and I worked on the chart. The coordinates circled in red weren't far, maybe 4 miles up the coast, a stretch of rocky shoreline I'd known my whole life. But Walter never did anything in a straight line. The chart had little marks on it, depth and bearings that didn't match the real water. And I realized, sitting there with a stub of pencil and a library atlas, that he'd encrypted it the way a draftsman would. The depths weren't depths, they were a sequence, and I was the only persons on God's green earth trained to read them. It took me 11 days. 11 days of a hungry old woman hunched over a borrowed atlas like she was defusing a bomb, and on the 11th day, the marks resolved into a single address. An old boathouse at the end of a private gravel road on Quarry Point, a place I'd driven past 1,000 times and never once looked at twice. There was one bright spot in those gray weeks, and I have to tell you about her because she comes back around. Lily, Diane's little girl, my granddaughter, 8 years old. Somehow, I never found out how. I think she took it off her mother's phone. Lily got my address, and one day an envelope showed up in my mailbox with a kid's drawing in it. A crayon sailboat, all crooked with a big yellow sun. On the back, in that careful second-grade printing, For Grandma, I miss you. That drawing got taped to my refrigerator and it stayed there. On the worst nights, that crooked little boat was the only thing in that apartment that loved me. I took the bus as far as it went and walked the last mile to Quarry Point in a November drizzle. The brass key fit the boathouse padlock like it had been cut yesterday. Inside, it smelled like cedar and salt and the particular cold of a building that's been shut up a long time. And there, under a canvas tarp, was a steel safe, a real one, bolted to the floor. The brass key didn't fit that. But taped to the top in a sandwich bag was a combination written in Walter's hand. My hands were shaking so bad it took me 3 tries. Inside the safe were 2 things: a stack of legal documents in a leather folder, and a small digital voice recorder, the cheap kind with a sticky note, "Play me." I opened the folder first. The top document was a property deed. I read the first line and forgot how to breathe. Property held in the name of Margaret Bellamy Hale, not Walter Hale, not Hale and Reed. Margaret Bellamy Hale. My maiden name and my married name together, the way no document had read since our wedding license. It was a deed to a parcel of waterfront land down near Camden. Estimated value $400,000, and it had been in my name for 11 years. The next one, an apartment building in Rockland, 12 units, all rented, in my name. The next, a small commercial marina up in Belfast, the kind that takes in boats for winter storage and charges through the nose for it, in my name. Coastal Lots. A self-storage outfit off Route 1. Page after page after page, every one of them stamped and notarized and legal. Every one of them held in the name of a woman who'd spent the last 11 years thinking she didn't own the chair she sat in. I sank down onto a sawhorse and I added it up in my head, which wasn't easy because my head was full of static. It came to something north of $14 million in real estate. 14 million. While I was cutting my blood pressure pills in half. When I could move again, I picked up the recorder and I pressed play. There was a hiss, a throat being cleared, and then his voice, clear as if he were standing in the boathouse next to me, and I nearly came apart right there. Meg, if you're hearing this, you found the chart and you read it, which means you're still the sharpest draftsman on this whole coast, no matter what you've let yourself believe. A pause. I could hear him breathing, heavy, the way he breathed those last couple years. I owe you an apology, and it's a big one, so I'm just going to say it. I left you a riddle instead of a fortune. I let those kids look at you like you were nothing. I did that on purpose, and I need you to know why. He coughed. 46 years ago, I married the smartest woman in Maine, and then I let her disappear into being my wife. I let it happen because it was easy for me. You poured yourself into me and those kids until there was nothing left over with your name on it, and I told myself I'd fix it someday. Well, someday's here, and I'm out of time, so I'm doing it the only way I know how. I'm making you go find yourself, instead of handing it to you. Because if I'd just handed you money, you'd have given it all to the kids inside a week. You know you would. I laughed, even with the tears running down, because he was right. God, he was right. Then his voice changed, got worried. But listen to me. Listen close. This was never supposed to hurt you, Meg. I set up a safety net. Silas is supposed to find you the first week, get you money, get you comfortable while you work the puzzle. So if you're hearing this and things have gone bad, if you're hungry or scared or somewhere you shouldn't be, then something went wrong, something I didn't plan for. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Get to Silas. He'll explain the rest. A click. End of recording. I sat in that cold boathouse holding a dead man's voice and a folder full of millions. And 2 things were true at the same time. My husband had built me a kingdom in secret. And something I didn't plan for, he'd said, had stepped in between us and made sure I starved anyway. I didn't know yet who, but I had an idea. And the idea made me very, very calm. There was one more thing in that folder. A single business card, no company name, just a phone number with a main area code and one word, Silas. I found a payphone outside a gas station. I couldn't afford a cell anymore, and I dialed with quarters I'd been hoarding in a coffee can. It rang 4 times. Then an old man's voice, warm and gravelly. "This is Silas. Mr. Reed," I said. "It's Meg Hale." The line went quiet for a second, then soft, "Oh, Meg. Oh, thank God. I have been losing my mind. I've been trying to reach you for 2 months. Silas Reed." the read and hail and read. Walter's best friend for 40 years, the man who'd handed me a glass of bad champagne at my own wedding. The other founder of the yard, bought out and retired a decade back, but still Walter's truest friend in the world. Walter made me the trustee, he said. I was supposed to come to you the week after the funeral, get you set up. But Meg, his voice cracked. Russell told me you didn't want to see me. Said you blamed me and Walter for cutting you out of the will. Said you'd told the whole family you never wanted to hear my name again. He had me banned from the yard, changed the gate codes, told the front desk to send me away. I wrote you 4 letters. Did you get a single one? I gripped that greasy payphone receiver so hard my knuckles went white. No, Silas, I said. I didn't get any letters. There it was, the thing Walter didn't plan for. My own son, standing between me and the net his father had hung to catch me. Where are you living? Silas asked. I told him. There was a silence on the line so long I thought we'd been cut off. When he spoke again, his voice was shaking with something that wasn't sadness. It was rage. I'm sending money tonight. From your own account, your own, Meg. It's not charity. You've got more sitting in cash than I'll see in this lifetime. You pay that landlord and you eat a hot meal. And first thing tomorrow, you're coming to see Walter's lawyer, not Prescott, the other one, the one nobody in your family knows exists. There's another lawyer? Oh, Meg, Silas said, and I swear I could hear him almost smiling through the fury. Walter built this thing in layers like a hull. You've only found the first plank. There's a whole boat under there. And there's more to it than money, a lot more. But I made him a promise I wouldn't say the rest. You need to hear it from the man himself on your birthday the way he wanted. A pause. Just hold on 3 more months. Can you do that? I looked down the dark street toward my brick air shaft and my hot plate and my crooked crayon sailboat. Silas, I said, I've held on this long. Watch me. That night, for the first time in 2 months, I made a real supper. Chicken, rice, green beans on a 2-burner hot plate, and it was the best meal of my life. At 11 o'clock, my phone, the cheap one I'd bought that very evening, buzzed with a bank alert. Deposit received $10,000. The next morning, I walked into Frank Doyle's office downstairs. The landlord, a heavyset man who smelled like cheap beer at 9 in the morning, and I put $2,000 cash on his desk. He counted it twice. Where'd a lady like you get this kind of money? That's not your concern, Mr. Doyle, I said. We're square. And I walked out with my chin up. Same coat, same old shoes, same brick airshaft waiting for me upstairs. But something underneath had changed, something down at the keel. The next morning, Silas drove up in an old pickup that smelled like pipe tobacco and took me to meet the lawyer my family never knew Walter had. Owen Caldwell's office was nothing like Prescott's chrome tower. It was on the 2nd floor of an old brick building down by the fish pier, up a flight of creaky wooden stairs, lined floor to ceiling with books and half-models of boats. The man himself was Walter's age, white-haired, gold-rimmed glasses, with the kind of face that's done a lot of smiling. He'd been Walter's personal attorney and his fishing buddy for 30 years, and Gerald Prescott had no idea he existed. Margaret Bellamy, he said, taking both my hands. Walt talked about you so much, I feel like I helped raise your kids. Then his face went serious, and I am sorry as hell about what's been done to you. If I'd had any idea you were living like that, I'd have torn that family apart myself. Walt kept us all in separate boxes. That was the whole point, and it cost you. Sit down. There's a lot. So I sat, and Owen told me the rest of it. The real estate you found, he said, the 14 million, that's the small part. You want to know where the money actually comes from? He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were licensing agreements, thick ones, the kind with a lot of zeros, between something called Bellamy Marine Holdings and shipbuilders. Big ones, yards in Rhode Island, in Florida, in Sweden, in New Zealand. About 20 years ago, Owen said, Walt patented a hull innovation. A self-righting ballast keel, a particular geometry to the keel and the ballast that lets a small sailboat right itself after a knockdown. You take a 28-foot boat, lay it flat on its side in a gale, and Walt's keel design stands it back up on its own. Coast Guard loved it. Insurance companies loved it more. Every serious blue water builder under 40 feet wanted to license it. He tapped the folder. For 20 years, the royalties have rolled in. Every boat built with that keel, a check comes back. And every one of those checks, every single one, gets deposited into a holding company. In Walter's name, I said. Owen looked at me over his glasses. No, Meg, in yours, Bellamy Marine Holdings, your maiden name. It's been yours the whole time. I sat very still. How much? The holding company, the accumulated royalties, the cash on hand, separate from the real estate. He took a breath. All in, Meg, you're worth a little over $40 million. And there's not $1 of debt against any of it. 40 million, I should have felt something huge. Mostly I felt the room tilt. $40 million, and 3 months ago I was cutting blood pressure pills with a kitchen knife so they'd last. Why? I finally said. Why would Walter spend 20 years building this and never tell me? I would have, and I stopped because the answer landed on me the same second the question left my mouth. I'd have given it to the kids. Every penny, Owen said gently. Walt knew you better than anybody alive. He said, and I quote, if I tell her while I'm breathing, she'll hand it to those kids and apologize for not having more. He wasn't wrong, was he? He wasn't wrong. But Owen wasn't done. He got up, went to a long flat cabinet against the wall, the kind you store blueprints in, and slid out a cardboard tube, the ends sealed with wax. There's one more thing Walt wanted you to have today, and he wanted me to watch your face when you opened it. So forgive me for staring. I broke the wax. I slid out a roll of drawings, old ones, the paper gone soft and yellow, the ink faded to brown. And the second I unrolled them, the whole boathouse, the whole rented room, the whole last 2 months, fell out from under me. Because I knew those drawings, I'd made those drawings. It was my hull, my senior project from the Maritime College in Castine, 1979. The lines drawn freehand at 23 years old, the design that yacht builder in Newport said, showed a once-in-a-generation hand. A self-writing hull with a keel geometry I'd worked out on a drafting table in a cold studio the winter before I married Walter. The drawings I folded up and put in a drawer because I'd decided to be a wife instead. There was a note clipped to the top sheet. Walter's writing, Meg, you always told yourself you gave up your career for us. You didn't. You never gave it up. I just kept it for you and finished what you started and let half the boats in the world ride on your lines. The keel that made all this money? You drew it, sweetheart, in 1979, before any of them existed. I only ever borrowed it, true to the keel. I want to tell you I held it together. I didn't. I sat on the floor of Owen Caldwell's office, 69 years old, a widow, a millionaire I didn't know I was, and I sobbed like a girl. Not because of the money. Because for 46 years I had carried this quiet, aching belief that I'd thrown my real self in a drawer for these people. And it wasn't true. My real self had been out there the whole time, under the waterline, holding up half the boats on the ocean, with my maiden name on the deed. Walter hadn't given me a fortune. He'd given me back me now. I could have walked into a bank that afternoon and lived like a queen. I could have called my children and dropped $40 million on the table and watched their faces. Owen and Silas both told me to wait for the birthday, the way Walter wanted, and I'd promised. But I had 3 months, and I'll be honest with you, there was a thing I needed to know first. I needed to know if there was any love left in those kids at all, or if it had all been about the money the whole time. So I went back among the wolves and I told them nothing. I took the bus across town to the yard and asked the front desk for Russell. Made me wait 3 hours in the lobby on a hard bench while folks in nice coats walked past me like I was part of the furniture. Finally, Russell came down, laughing with a couple of suits. And when he saw me, his face did this thing. A flicker of embarrassment, gone in a half second, replaced by pure irritation. Mom, what are you doing here? I needed to talk to you, honey. They're about to put me out of the apartment. The money stopped. He glanced at the suits. Give me a sec, fellas, I'll catch up. He waited till they were gone, then turned back to me, and his voice dropped into this flat, bored register that hurt worse than yelling. We talked about this. We floated you 6 months. You sent $600 once. Yeah, 'cause you blow through money, Mom, you always have. He checked his watch, a watch that cost more than I'd see in a year. Look, you're 69, not 109. Get a job. Clean houses, I don't care. Figure it out. Dad left you a toy boat for a reason. Maybe the reason is he wanted you to grow up. I looked at my son, my firstborn, the baby I rocked through croup and colic, and I waited to feel rage. I didn't. I felt the strangest, coldest calm, like the harbor in a dead January, because I knew something he didn't, and I knew now that there was nothing left in him to find. You're right, Russell, I said quietly. I'll figure it out. He was already walking away. At a girl, he tossed over his shoulder, and he didn't look back. Diane actually picked up when I called, which surprised me, but she didn't ask how I was. She launched straight into a monologue about the house, my house, and the renovation. We're gutting the kitchen, Mom. It was so dated, no offense. The designer says we all in around 400 grand. It's an investment. 400,000, I said. It'll show really well when she stopped herself. Anyway, did you need something? I've got the contractor here. There was something in her voice. A thin, brittle edge under the bragging. Something I'd have missed if I weren't her mother. Diane wasn't flush. Diane was terrified. I filed that away. No, sweetheart, I said. I just wanted to hear your voice. Okay, well, you heard it. Gotta run. Click. Teddy never called at all. 10 days before my birthday, the phone rang, and it was Gerald Prescott, the corporate lawyer. My heart kicked. Had they found out? Had the plan leaked? Mrs. Hale, he said, and his voice had lost all its dry confidence. He sounded rattled. We need you to come in, all of us. There's been a development with the estate. Tomorrow, 2:00. When I walked into Prescott's chrome conference room the next day, all three of my children were there, sitting in the same chairs they'd sat in to laugh at me. But nobody was laughing now. Russell looked gray. Diane's eyes were red. Teddy had his head down, staring at the table like he wanted it to swallow him. I took my old seat at the foot of the table, but I sat down different than I used to. Prescott cleared his throat. Mrs. Hale, in conducting due diligence on the transfer of the boatworks, we've uncovered significant liabilities, debts, structured into the company in ways that weren't disclosed. How significant? I asked. Russell wouldn't look at me. Diane answered, her voice shaking. The yard everybody thinks is worth millions, Mom. It owes about $16 million. Loans, liens, balloon payments. We're not inheriting a business. We're inheriting a whole. We're looking at bankruptcy, Prescott said, possibly within the quarter. A long silence. And then I understood why I was really in that room. And you called me, I said slowly, because you're wondering if I've got anything hidden away that could bail you out. Nobody answered, which was its own answer. After 46 years, I said, your father left me a toy boat. You all watched it happen. You think he tucked $16 million in my sock drawer? Did you ever open it? Russell said suddenly, leaning forward. The boat? Did you get it open? And here's where I made my choice. I could have told them right there. I almost wanted to, just to watch. But I looked at them, really looked, and I saw three frightened people who'd come running to their mother not out of love, but out of arithmetic. And I decided the truth could wait 10 more days. It's a toy, Russell, I said. Some old photos inside, a couple of voice memos. Your father saying goodnight, most of which was even true, nothing worth a dime. The disappointment on their faces was something I'll remember till I die. Diane started to cry, not pretty crying, the real kind, the ugly kind. I co-signed, she whispered, mostly to herself. Russ said it was just paperwork. I co-signed on the expansion loans. They're going to come after the house. They're going to come after us. I looked at Russell. Russell was looking at the table. And 10 days before I understood the whole truth, I understood the first piece of it. My daughter wasn't just greedy. My daughter had been used. Owen called the night before my birthday. Tomorrow morning, 9 sharp, my office. I've invited all 3 of your children in Prescott. Per Walt's instructions, the whole truth comes out on your 70th birthday. Everything. A pause. Meg, brace yourself. There's a last piece even you haven't heard. Walt made me swear to save it for the room. That night I couldn't sleep. At 5 I gave up, showered in water that couldn't decide if it was hot or cold, and put on the one nice thing I'd bought with Silas's money, a dark green suit the color of the Margaret B. hull. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in a long time I recognized the woman looking back. I got to Owen's office at 8:40. He met me at the top of those creaky stairs and pressed a thick envelope into my hands, sealed with red wax, from Walt. He wanted you to read it before the others get here. Take your time, I'll stall him. I broke the seal. Pages and pages in that blocky hand, my dearest Meg. If you're reading this, you made it to 70, and you made it the hard way, which means you're standing taller right now than you have in decades. I can see it. Good. I need to tell you the truth about our children, and it's going to hurt, so I'll be quick. They didn't turn out the way we hoped. That's on me. I gave them money instead of meaning. I taught them that the size of the deal was the size of the man. By the time I saw it clear, they were grown and it was too late to fix them. So I did the next best thing. I made sure that when I was gone, the money would teach them the lesson I never did. The yard's a beautiful rotten hull, Meg. Let it sink. It has to sink for them to learn to swim. But there's one thing I could not write down here, because writing it would have forced me to choose between two of our children, and I couldn't do that from the grave. So I left it with the one of them who still has a conscience buried in him somewhere. Teddy's holding it. When the time comes, look at your youngest boy and ask him for what his father gave him. He'll know. You were always somebody, Meg, long before me, long before them. Go be her, true to the keel. Yours every plank of me, Walter. I wiped my face, squared my shoulders, and I walked into that conference room. They were already seated. Russell, Diane, Teddy, Prescott on the end. When I came in, their heads turned, and I watched three jaws come loose. Because the broken old woman from 10 days ago was gone. I sat down across from all of them, straight-backed, calm, and I let Owen Caldwell run the show. Good morning, Owen said. Today is Margaret Hale's 70th birthday. As Walter Hale specifically instructed, the full truth of his estate will now be disclosed. He opened his briefcase and began laying documents on the table, one by one, slow, deliberate, like a man dealing the last hand of a long game. For the past 20 years, Owen said, Walter Hale built a second estate, entirely separate from the boatworks, held under a holding company none of you have ever heard of. He laid down the first deed, $14 million in coastal real estate. Held in the name of Margaret Bellamy Hale. The silence cracked. Russell shot forward. That's not possible. Dad would have told us we're his kids. He specifically did not tell you, Owen said, not raising his voice. In fact, he specifically excluded you. Here are the records. He laid down more. And here are the licensing agreements. Walter held a patent, a self-writing keel design, licensed to shipbuilders across 4 countries for 2 decades. The royalties, the accumulated cash, the holding company itself. He laid down the last page and looked up. All told, Margaret Hale is worth a little over $40 million. And unlike the yard the 3 of you inherited, there is not $1 of debt against any of it. I have never heard a room go so quiet. The clock on Owen's wall ticked. Somebody, Diane, let out a small broken sound. Russell was on his feet, his chair clattering backward. This is insane. We're his children. She gets 40 million and we get bankruptcy? You can't. He wasn't right in the head. Walter Hale was examined by 3 physicians the month before he died, Owen said, steel under the warmth now. All 3 certified him of completely sound mind. And the woman you're standing there raging about, he nodded at me, is the woman who drew the keel that made every dollar of it. He reached into the cardboard tube and unrolled my 1979 drawings across the table for all of them to see. This design, the one that built the patent, the one that built the whole fortune. Margaret Bellamy drew it in 1979, before any of you were born. Your father didn't build this empire on his genius. He built it on hers, the genius she set aside to raise the 3 of you. I watched it land on them. I watched my children understand, for the first time in their lives, that the mother they'd called useless was the foundation under everything they'd ever bragged about. Russell wasn't done. Russell is never done. This is fraud. This is elder abuse. Somebody manipulated him. This whole thing stinks. And that's when it happened. The last piece. Stop it, Russ. It was Teddy. My quiet, spineless youngest on his feet, shaking like a leaf, his face white as a sail. Just stop for once in your life. Stop talking. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, worn soft like it'd been carried a long time. handled 1,000 times and never opened by anyone but the man who'd sealed it. Dad gave me this, Teddy said, and his voice broke clean in half, the week before he died. He told me, he said, Teddy, when I'm gone, you put this in your mother's hands, day of the funeral, before anything else. He looked at me, and the tears were just pouring down his face now. And I didn't, Mom. I didn't give it to you. Because Russ, he turned on his brother. Russ said if Mom read it before the will, it'd complicate the transition. He said, keep it quiet. He said it was for the good of the family. And God help me, I listened to him, like I always listen to him. I let you starve with this in my pocket. He put the envelope on the table and slid it to me. And then, before I could even reach for it, he said the thing that blew the whole room apart. I read it last night, Mom, finally, and you all need to hear what's in it. He picked it back up with shaking hands and he read it out loud. It was Walter, and it laid the whole thing bare. The yard wasn't drowning because of bad luck or a soft market or some clever trap Walter had laid. The yard was drowning because Russell had been bleeding it for years, quietly mortgaging the assets, taking out high-interest loans against the company and funneling the cash into side deals, real estate flips, a restaurant, a marina down in Florida that all went bust. And to cover the holes, he'd talked his own sister into co-signing, Diane. He'd told her it was routine paperwork, an expansion, a sure thing. He'd hung $16 million of his own failures around the whole family's neck. Walter had found out about 2 years before he died, and the letter explained in plain words what he did with what he found. I could have turned Russell in. I could have blown this family apart in public. Instead, I made a choice. I quietly moved every real thing of value, the patent, the royalties, the land, out of the company and into your name, Meg, where he could never reach it. And I let Russell inherit exactly what he'd built, an empty hull he'd already gutted himself. I didn't punish our children, Meg. I protected you from the one who would have taken everything you had left. The debt isn't my trap. It's his bill, finally coming due. The room didn't make a sound. Diane was staring at Russell's like she'd never seen him before. Teddy was wrecked, hollowed out, but standing straighter than I'd ever seen him stand. And Russell had nothing. No deal to make, no angle to work, no lie left that would hold water. Just a man at the bottom of a hole he'd dug with his own hands. I picked up Walter's letter from where Teddy laid it, and I held it against my chest, and I understood at last that my husband had never been cruel to me. Not for 1 second. Everything I'd suffered, every cut pill and cold meal, that was Russell standing in the doorway between me and the life Walter built to keep me safe. I stood up, and for the first time in that whole meeting, every eye in the room came to me, not with pity, not with contempt, but with something that looked an awful lot like fear. For 46 years, I said, and my voice was steady, I made myself into whatever the 4 of you needed, the wife, the mother, the one who went last so the rest of you could go first. I walked slowly around the table, and the minute your father was in the ground, you threw me out like a busted lobster trap. You frisked my luggage. You sent me $600 in a post-it. You told me to go clean houses. I stopped behind my own empty chair. Your father left me $40 million. But that's not what he gave me, not really. He gave me 3 months to find out exactly who you are with the masks off, and now I have to decide what to do with all of it. I looked at each of them. I have more than enough to make your debt disappear like it never happened. I watched the hope flare up in their faces, desperate, pathetic, instant. But I'm not going to. Diane made a sound like she'd been hit. Russell's hands curled into fists. Teddy just closed his eyes. Not because I want to watch you suffer, I said. Because your father was right. And he's in a rented room over a laundromat to understand it. Money without knowing what it costs is a curse. You've never built a single thing for yourselves in your whole lives. It's time you learned how. The bankruptcy stands. I picked up my purse. At the door, I turned around one last time. But hear me, I'm not closing the door forever. Not tomorrow, not next year, but someday, if you do the work, if you learn what an honest dollar weighs, if you come to me as my children and not as people who need a check, then maybe we rebuild what's broken. My eyes found Teddy, standing there wet-faced and finally upright, Some of you are closer to that door than others. And I walked out, head up, down those creaky wooden stairs and into the cold, bright morning toward the rest of my life. Silas was waiting on the sidewalk. He took one look at my face and started to grin. "Walt be proud," he said. "I know," I said, and I did. It's June now. The fog burned off early this year. I'm standing in front of a small storefront down on Sefton's working waterfront, watching a man hang a sign I designed myself. Hand-lettered, gold leaf on harbor green, the same green as a certain toy boat, Bellamy Marine Design. And underneath, smaller, true to the keel, it's a naval architecture studio. My studio. Not an investment, not a rental, a drafting room with big north windows and the best light on the coast where a 70-year-old woman who put her pencils in a drawer in 1979 took them back out. I've hired 2 young designers, sharp kids, and a girl apprentice just out of the same college in Castine went to. And I pay them well, and I'm teaching them everything Walter and I ever knew about the way a hull should sit in the water. Some mornings I draw for 6 hours straight and forget to eat, and it's the best kind of forgetting. I heard about the kids through Silas. The yard filed for bankruptcy in April. Russell's working as a regular boat broker now, a salesman, selling other men's vessels on commission, and there's an investigation into those loans that may not end well for him. Diane sold the house on Sefton Point. She's in a normal apartment now, working a normal job for the first time in her life. And Silas tells me she's actually lighter, like she finally set something heavy down. And Teddy writes me, real letters in the mail in his terrible handwriting. He went back and finished the degree he quit a decade ago. He doesn't ask for money, not once, not ever. He asks how the studio's going. He tells me about his classes. Last week, he asked if he could come up some Saturday and just sit in the drafting room and watch me work, and I said yes. We're a long way from fixed. But that door I left cracked open. My youngest is standing in it. I set up one more thing, too. A trust. A scholarship for kids in this town who've got the hand for marine design but not the money for the schooling. I named it after the only person in my whole family who never once stopped loving me through all of it. The Lily Fund. She came up to visit last week, my granddaughter, 8 years old, and she sat at the spare drafting table next to mine with a fat pencil and drew a sales photo, crooked with a big yellow sun, just like the one still taped to my old refrigerator. And I leaned over and showed her how to make the lines come out fair. On my desk, where everyone can see it, sits a little wood 16 inches long, harbor green, with my name in gold on the transom. The Margaret B. I keep it there like a saint keeps a relic. Some nights, alone in the studio after the kids have gone home, I hum the old Halyard chanty Walter used to sing under his breath while he planed aboard. And I swear I can feel him in the room, finally at peace. He didn't leave
I've
me
read a
toy
lot of
boat.
these
He left
stories
me
on this
back to
channeled Would
myself.
Asade, but Margaret stayed with me, and I think I know why. See, Walter's fortune was never really the point. The man spent 20 years quietly protecting a fortune that was hers to begin with. And the one real gift he gave her was the chance to remember she'd been somebody before she was anybody's wife or anybody's mother. That one hits different, because so many of us pour ourselves into people who only measure us by what we do for them, and somewhere in there, we lose the person we were when we walked in the door. So before you click away, I'm going to ask you to do one thing. Call the woman in your life who set something quiet aside so you could shine. Don't wait for a sealed letter to say it. And if this story moved you, well, you already know what to do.